I didn't expect a simple knock on my door to pull a truth out of a young man who'd been holding his breath for far too long. My brother's son showed up with a look that didn't match his age, like he'd already lived through something heavy. What he told me that evening didn't just worry me. It made me see my own life differently, and it changed the way our family spoke to each other from that day on. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. It was late autumn when it happened, the kind of evening where the light turns honey-colored before it slips away too quickly. I remember because I'd been standing by the kitchen window, watching the last leaves swirl along the curb like they were trying to decide whether to let go or hold on. I was 48 then, living alone in a small house with a porch swing that creaked even when the wind barely moved. My life was quiet in a way I used to be proud of, organized, controlled, predictable. The older I got, the more I treated peace like a fragile glass I carried with both hands. The knock came right as I was rinsing a mug. 3 soft taps, then a pause, then one more like someone changed their mind and tried again. I dried my hands on a towel and opened the door expecting a package or maybe my neighbor. Instead, it was Jonah, my brother's son. He stood there with his shoulders tucked in, hands shoved into the pockets of a thin jacket like he'd stepped outside too fast. His hair was damp, and I could tell he'd either been caught in a quick drizzle or had run his hands through it a dozen times. "Hey, Aunt Claire," he said, and his voice cracked just enough to make me straighten. "Jonah?" I leaned forward. "What are you doing out here? Are you okay?" He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, I think so. Can I come in?" There are 1,000 ways a person can say those 4 words. Jonah said them like he was asking for permission to breathe. I stepped aside. "Of course. Come in. You're freezing." The warmth of the house hit him, and he blinked like it surprised him. I closed the door and watched him stand in the entryway, not moving farther, as if the floor beyond was unfamiliar territory. "You want some tea?" I asked gently. "Or coca? I've got both." He nodded once, too quickly. "Tea's fine." I led him into the kitchen. The overhead light was soft and a little yellow, the kind that makes everything look calmer than it really is. Outside, the sky had turned a deep slate color, and the first porch light on the street flickered on. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove. The small routine gave my hands something to do while my eyes kept checking his face. Jonah sat at the table but didn't lean back. He perched on the chair like he was prepared to leave at any moment. His knee bounced once, then stopped as if he'd noticed me noticing. "How's your dad?" I asked, careful. "Is everything all right at home?" He swallowed. "Yeah, he's fine." That answer didn't comfort me. It was too quick, too smooth, like he'd practiced it in the car. The kettle began to hum. I opened the cabinet, pulled out 2 mugs, and set them down. Then I did something I'd learned over the years, something that had saved more conversations than I could count. I stopped asking questions. I just sat down across from him and waited. Silence can feel rude if you don't understand it, but silence can also be a doorway. Sometimes people need you to stop pulling words out of them and simply make a space where their truth can land safely. Jonah stared at the table's wood grain, following the lines as though they were a map. His fingers tapped once against the edge of his sleeve. Then he exhaled in a slow, shaky way that sounded like surrender. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. My heart tightened. "I'm glad you came here." He glanced up at me fast, like he needed to check if I meant it. "You are?" "Always," I said. "No conditions." The kettle clicked off. I poured the water, let the tea steep, and added a little honey the way I liked it. When I brought the mug to him, My hand brushed his for a second. He flinched barely, but I saw it. That's the thing about being an aunt. You notice the small shifts, the tiny changes that other people dismiss as teen mood or young adult drama. I'd watched Jonah grow up. I'd seen his laugh when he was little, the way he used to run straight into a hug without thinking. The young man sitting at my table looked like someone who'd been told, in 100 quiet ways, to keep his feelings small. He wrapped both hands around the mug, using the warmth like a shield. "I'm not trying to start trouble," he said quickly. "I'm not trying to make anybody look bad." "Okay," I said softly. "You don't have to defend yourself here." He pressed his lips together, like that sentence was unfamiliar. I've been worried, for a while." "About what?" I asked, still calm, still steady. My voice was gentle, but my insides were bracing. Jonah's eyes flicked toward the window. The dark glass reflected the kitchen behind us. 2 figures sitting at a table, one older, one younger, both caught in a moment that could change everything. He lowered his voice. "About my dad." I didn't react the way my instincts wanted to. My brother, Mark, was a stubborn man, a proud man, the kind who laughed off discomfort and called it strength. We grew up in a household where problems were handled with silence and work, not with words. Mark had inherited that fully. I kept my face neutral. "Tell me." Jonah's throat bobbed. He's not himself, and he keeps acting like everything is normal. But it's not." A cold ripple ran through me, even as the mug warmed my hands. "In what way?" I asked. Jonah hesitated. Then, like he finally found the strength he'd come searching for, he leaned forward just a little. "He forgets things," he said, "small things at first, like where he left his keys or what day it is. But then it started being bigger things. He missed my graduation meeting at school. He didn't even remember we talked about it. And last week, he called me by his brother's name." My stomach tightened. Mark's brother, our other brother, had been gone for years. Jonah hadn't even known him well. I told myself it was stress. Jonah continued, words spilling faster now that they'd started. "Work, money, whatever." But then I found him standing in the garage just staring at the shelves, like he didn't know why he was there. And when I asked, he got mad. Really mad. He said I was treating him like an old man. He swallowed hard and looked down at his tea as if it could steady him. "And then," he added, quieter, he said something that scared me. I held my breath. What did he say? Jonah's hands tightened around the mug until his knuckles went pale. He said, "Don't look at me like that. I'm not falling apart." Jonah's voice cracked on the last word. He cleared his throat and blinked quickly, as if he hated the idea of tears. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. "If I bring it up, he shuts down. If I mention a doctor, he chokes. If I tell my mom, she says I'm overthinking. And I keep wondering, what if I'm not? What if something's really wrong and we're just all pretending?" The kitchen felt suddenly smaller, like the air had thickened. I reached across the table, not to grab him, not to force comfort on him, but to place my hand on the table near his, close enough to be felt, not close enough to overwhelm. "You did the right thing coming here," I said. Jonah let out a shaky laugh that wasn't a laugh at all. "Did I? Because I feel like I'm being disloyal." "No," I said firmly. "You're being brave. There's a difference." He stared at my hand, then at my face. "You don't think I'm making it up?" "I think you're paying attention," I said, "and that matters." The words seemed to settle into him. His shoulders dropped a fraction, like he'd been holding them up by force. I took a slow breath. My mind was already moving. Memories of Mark missing a birthday call, repeating a story at Thanksgiving, snapping at a simple question. I'd noticed, yes, but I'd file it away under "he's tired," because that's what we do in families like ours. We excuse. We smooth things over. We avoid the discomfort until it becomes unavoidable. And now Jonah was sitting at my table, asking me to step into what everyone else was stepping around. "I need you to promise me something," he said suddenly. "Okay," I answered. "What?" He looked straight at me, eyes serious in a way that made him look older than his years. "Don't go to him angry," Jonah said. "Please. If you talk to him, don't make him feel cornered. He'll just push harder." I nodded slowly. "I hear you." Jonah exhaled like he'd been holding that plea in his chest all night. Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping across the kitchen wall for a second like a quiet warning. I sat back, letting the silence return for a moment. Then I asked the question that mattered most. "What do you need from me right now?" Jonah hesitated, and then his voice softened, almost embarrassed by its honesty. I need an adult who doesn't brush it off," he said. "Someone who'll help me figure out what's real." My throat tightened, because in that sentence I heard more than worry about his father. I heard loneliness, responsibility, the weight of being the one who sees the crack in the wall while everyone else admires the paint. I nodded. "Okay," I said. "I'm here. We'll figure it out together." And as Jonah finally took a sip of tea, his hands still trembling but his eyes steadier, I realized something I hadn't expected when I opened my door. This wasn't just Jonah coming to me for help. This was Jonah inviting me to become the kind of woman who doesn't look away anymore. Jonah stayed for a while after that, long enough for the tea to cool and for the house to settle back into its quiet rhythm. We didn't rush into solutions. That night wasn't about fixing anything. It was about letting the truth sit in the open without being pushed back into the dark. When he finally left, I stood at the door and watched him walk down the porch steps. He paused at the end, turned, and gave me a small nod. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. But it carried something important in it: trust. After the door closed, the house felt different. Not emptier. Heavier. Like it now held a responsibility it hadn't before. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed listening to the clock in the hallway tick, my mind replaying moments I'd ignored. Mark showing up late to a family dinner and laughing it off. Mark telling the same story twice in one afternoon. Mark snapping when I corrected him about something small, his pride flaring faster than it used to. I'd told myself we were all getting older, that life wears us down in quiet ways. But Jonah's words echoed in my chest. What if something's really wrong and we're just all pretending? By morning, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I called Mark just after breakfast. I kept my voice light when he answered, casual, like this was just another sibling check-in. "Hey," I said. "You busy today?" "Always," he replied, half joking. "What's up?" "I was thinking of stopping by," I said. "I've got some things I need to drop off. And I miss you." There was a pause on the line, just a beat too long. "Yeah," he said finally. "Sure. Come by." His house was only 20 minutes away, but the drive felt longer. The sky was pale and overcast, the kind of morning that presses down gently without warning. As I pulled into his driveway, I sat in the car for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, reminding myself of Jonah's request. Don't go to him angry. Don't corner him. I knocked, and Mark answered wearing the same flannel he always wore, sleeves rolled up, coffee in hand. He smiled when he saw me, but it flickered, just a fraction late. "Claire," he said, "what brings you by?" "You," I said, matching his smile. "You got a minute?" He stepped aside. The house smelled like coffee and dust, and something faintly burned, like toast forgotten too long. Familiar, comforting. and suddenly fragile. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where his kids had done homework for years. Mark talked about work, complained about traffic, joked about getting older. I listened, nodding, letting him speak until his words slowed, and he looked at me with a curious tilt of his head. "You didn't come all this way just to hear me ramble," he said. I folded my hands on the table. No. There it was, the moment Jonah had been afraid of. "I came because I care about you," I said carefully, "and because I've noticed some things." Mark's shoulders stiffened almost instantly. "Like what?" "Small stuff," I said. "Forgetting appointments. Getting frustrated quicker than you used to." He scoffed. "So now being busy is a problem?" I didn't rise to it. "No. Being human isn't a problem. But being alone with something that might need attention can be." His jaw tightened. He stared at the coffee in his mug like it had betrayed him. "I'm fine," he said flatly. I took a breath. Jonah's worried. His head snapped up. "You talked to Jonah?" "Yes," I said. "He came to me." Mark pushed his chair back slightly, not standing, but creating distance. "He shouldn't have done that." "He didn't come to criticize you," I said. "He came because he loves you." Mark laughed once, sharp and humorless. "He's a kid. Kids worry." "He's not a kid anymore," I said gently. "And what he sees matters." Silence filled the space between us. I could almost hear Jonah's voice in my head warning me. I softened my tone, leaned in just a little. "I'm not here to tell you something's wrong with you," I said. "I'm here to tell you that you don't have to face questions by yourself." Mark's eyes dropped. For a long moment, I thought he might shut down completely. But then something shifted. His shoulders sagged, just a bit. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "I walk into a room and forget why I'm there. And it scares me." My heart clenched, but I stayed steady. "I don't want to end up like Dad," he continued. "Confused, dependent." I swore I wouldn't. I reached across the table and rested my hand near his, the same way I had with Jonah. "Getting answers doesn't make you weak," I said. "It makes you responsible, especially to the people who love you." He looked at my hand, then away. "If I go to a doctor," he said quietly, "everything changes." "Or," I replied, "maybe it gives you a chance to change things early." The words hung there. Mark didn't respond right away, but he didn't pull away either. When I left later, nothing was resolved. No appointments made, no promises given, but something important had cracked open. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. A message from Jonah. "Did you talk to him?" I'd pulled over before answering. "Yes," I typed, and I listened. A few seconds passed. "Thank you," he replied. "Really." I sat there with the engine idling, feeling the weight of what had begun. This wasn't a single conversation. It was the start of a long road, one that would test patience, honesty, and love in ways none of us had expected. But for the first time, I knew we weren't pretending anymore. And sometimes that's the bravest step of all. The weeks that followed didn't bring clarity the way movies pretend they do. There was no sudden relief, no clean answers. Instead, there was waiting. Careful conversations. Long pauses where everyone seemed to be measuring their words, afraid of tipping something fragile. Mark didn't call me much after that visit, but he didn't avoid me either. When I reached out, he answered. Sometimes we talked about nothing at all. Weather, traffic, old memories that made him smile. Other times, the silence stretched between us, heavy but no longer hostile. Jonah, on the other hand, checked in often. Short messages at first. "How's he doing today?" Or, "Did he seem okay when you talked?" I answered honestly, never dramatic, never reassuring him with false certainty. I remembered what it felt like to be young and worried, to sense something wrong but not be trusted with the truth. I wasn't going to do that to him. One Saturday afternoon, Jonah came over again. This time he didn't stand in the doorway. He walked straight in, set his jacket down, and sat at the kitchen table like it belonged to him. That alone told me something had shifted. "He's trying," Jonah said after a while. "I can tell." I nodded. Trying counts. Jonah stared at his hands. "Sometimes I feel like I'm watching my parent become a stranger. And then I hate myself for thinking that." I sat across from him. "That feeling doesn't mean you love him less. It means you're paying attention." He let out a breath he'd clearly been holding. "No one ever says that." "That doesn't make it untrue." He looked up at me then, really looked, like he was seeing me not just as his aunt, but as someone who had lived enough life to understand loss before it fully arrived. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course." "Were you ever scared to face something big?" he asked. "Something that could change everything?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of the years after my divorce, the way I'd built a quiet life brick by bricks, so I wouldn't have to feel unsteady again. I thought of how safety can become a cage if you cling to it too tightly. "Yes," I said, "many times." "What did you do?" "I learned that pretending not to see the truth didn't protect me," I said. "It just delayed the moment I had to grow." Jonah nodded slowly, absorbing that. A few days later, Mark called me himself. His voice sounded tired, but calmer. "I made an appointment," he said. I closed my eyes, not in relief, but in respect. That wasn't easy. "No," he admitted, "but neither is wondering." We didn't talk long. He didn't want advice. He just wanted someone to know he'd taken the step. When I hung up, I sat quietly for a long time, thinking about how courage doesn't always look loud or confident. Sometimes it looks like a man making a phone call he's been avoiding for months. The appointment didn't solve everything. There were more tests, more waiting, more uncertainty than answers. But something important changed in our family. We stopped pretending. Jonah was included in conversations, not shielded from them. Mark stopped snapping when he forgot something and started saying, "Give me a second." His wife stopped brushing things off and started writing things down. The house grew quieter, but also more honest. One evening, Jonah and I sat on the porch swing, watching the sky turn the color of old paper. He rocked the swing gently with his foot. "I used to think strength meant not needing anyone," he said. "And now?" I asked. "And now I think it means knowing who you can lean on." I smiled at that, because in helping Jonah find the courage to speak, I had been reminded of something I'd forgotten myself. Life doesn't ask us to be fearless. It asks us to be present. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do, for ourselves and for the people we love, is to stop looking away and stay. Time has a quiet way of moving forward even when answers arrive slowly. Months passed, marked not by big announcements, but by small adjustments. A calendar hung on Mark's refrigerator with notes written in careful block letters. Jonah learned how to ask questions without sounding afraid, and I learned how to listen without trying to rush anyone toward comfort. The results eventually came, not dramatic, not final, but clear enough to guide the next steps. Nothing was solved in a single visit, and no one pretended it was. What mattered most was that Mark stopped facing uncertainty alone. He accepted help, not all at once, but in pieces. A ride to an appointment, a reminder call, a pause before frustration could take over. One evening, not long after, we gathered for dinner at my house. Nothing fancy, just soup, bread, and a pie Jonah insisted on bringing even though it leaned to one side. We laughed about that, real laughter. The kind that fills a room and reminds you that worry hasn't taken everything. At one point, I watched Jonah talking to his father, explaining something patiently, without fear. Mark listened, truly listened, nodding instead of brushing it aside. That moment stayed with me. not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. Later, after everyone left, I sat alone on the porch swing, the same one that creaked on quiet nights. The air was cool, the street calm. I thought about how close we'd come to staying silent. How easy it would have been to dismiss Joma's worry as imagination or youth. How dangerous that would have been. Aging teaches you something important. Not everything can be controlled, but almost everything can be faced with dignity if you choose connection over denial. Jonah called me a few days after that dinner. "I just wanted to say something," he said. "I'm listening," I replied. "Thank you for believing me," he said. "If you hadn't, I think I would have stopped trusting my own instincts." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Never doubt what you notice," I told him. Paying attention is a gift. After we hung up, I realized something else had changed too. I wasn't guarding my quiet life so tightly anymore. I had let people in, let uncertainty in, and somehow my world felt steadier because of it. This experience didn't just help a young man find his voice. It reminded an older woman that strength doesn't fade with age. It deepens when shared. And if there's one thing I carry forward from that evening when my brother's son knocked on my door, it's this. When someone finds the courage to speak their worry out loud, the most powerful thing you can do is listen. Sometimes that's how healing begins.